What's good, people? Nice to be back. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe right now. Now let's talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode 7. Now, I haven't done a few episodes in the last few weeks, but I do want to say it's been such an enjoyable season. I love the way that each show represents the typeface and the fashion and the music of the decades as we move along: 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. We stop here in 1983, but the prologue from the end of the last episode in number 6 was the fact that Mac's parents were killed by the Chronicons and they were replaced, and obviously the guys took them out. And what it done is it really put Max down in the dumps. He left the ship. Lo and behold, Deke ran after him. They had no idea that the time jump was going to happen, and the Zephyr went ahead and left them in the year 1983. Now, when they both find out that they've been left in time, they kind of try, well, not necessarily try to move on and make amends, but they just kind of really get on with it. Decky forms a band called the Decky Band. Well, for him, old songs, but for everyone who's not even heard of them yet, because they haven't come out, new songs. And then he tries to make a living off that, because remember, he's a tech head, yeah? So he can always get by. So he has his own thing going on, creates his own band, which is actually a cover-up for new Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. now, full of disco lights and all this other stuff. It's some crazy stuff. That was the decade of electrics, electronics, the decade of robots, Knight Rider, and all this stuff that's going on. So that was a decade that kind of really celebrated even Disney's The Black Hole. So it celebrated all those things. I'm going to come back to that later because that's quite cool the way that they did everything. So Mac is really down in the dumps, and that's where we're going to really start. He's the pivot point for this episode. And it's really sad to see that Mac had really taken it on in such a negative light. The fact that he's lost his parents, him and his brother now was living with the uncle, and they'd kind of sort of lost all hope. He's sitting at home because his dad had talked to him about automobiles and cars. That's what he was doing. He was sitting home, drinking beer and just fixing up automobile cars, just model cars, just painting them and fixing them up and everything, and really just throwing his life away, losing all hope. There's one scene where he's just drinking beer. Decky was trying to keep tabs on him. He was coming in, visiting him, buying him groceries, leaving him at the front door. He'll come back in a week's time and see that the last week's groceries were sitting at the front door. So man ain't even left his house. Yeah, Mac was just living like a hermit, feeling sorry for himself, the fact that everything has just imploded. And there's a scene where he's run out of beer and he's laying down. The man's beard grown from here all the way down to his chest, and he just looked like Fat Four from Avengers Endgame. And my God, guys, this guy had sunk from the lowest to the low. It was hilarious to see how much he had sunk. But behind the scenes, what was happening was the head Chronicon had actually remained as a program, and she had facilitated a programmer. Yeah, there was a guy who fixed computers, hard drives, etc. And this master programmer had got onto Sybil. And Sybil had actually attached herself to him in a kind of love crazy way. Think of it like Weird Science. Remember that film Weird Science with Michael C. Hall in the 80s? And there was that tropes that they built the perfect woman, and this was the woman in red. And it was one of those things, like all these 80s tropes thrown in, paying homage to that decade. Was this guy just falling in love with an AI? She printed her face out on dot matrix printers. I mean, the whole thing was hilarious. Again, 80s, best decade ever. Yeah, that's not even arguable right there. The fact that we were introduced to all these different type of electronics, and although I've been a video gamer since the 70s with Atari, it wasn't until the 80s that we were really done in the computer era big time. Commodore 64, the Amiga, Atari ST, Sega Mega Drive, Nintendo NES. Everything was just piling on, and as a child, as a teenager those days, we were just loving life, roller skating, all the kind of rap electro music that had come into the market. It was the best time ever. And I think that this show really captures that in its message and its mirror, and the fact that everything was disco here and disco party in here and the long perm hair and everything else and the clothes. The show's catching everything. It's catching the essence of what it is like throughout the decades. And with this one, we get to the point where she talks him into making a robot. And there's a lot of trope robots being used in this episode. The Daleks, Cybermen, the biggest one was Short Circuit, Johnny Five, Knight Rider Kit, the Cylons, everything, guys, Maximilian. And all of this was with the red lasers. You even heard, when the robots were built, you heard the laser go woo, woo, woo. And that's remnant of the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica, remnant of Kit and Knight Rider. And it really was just an enjoyable trope episode. I keep using the word because it was fantastically enjoyable. But what happens is, she then gets the programmer to build her all these robot bodies, and then they ended up kind of trying to get the time stream back, which was the box that they had lost. And that was really what the fight was. The fight for the episode was really to maintain the time stream box so that they can carry on with their missions. And I think it was really sad to see Max in that state, but knowing that Decade had his back, Decade introduced him to his team, the rock band, who was just like a bunch of, again, 80s, the Russian woman who couldn't speak English that was a copy of Bridget Nelson, and there was these two Japanese twins there and everything. It was just hilarious, guys. But in the end, what it turned out was Decade was keeping tabs on young Max, and he was sort of making sure that they were all right. The uncle had a better car, and they were just being looked after. He really took care of them while he was watching over them. And when Max saw that, and my teammate is actually the one that's looking after young me, and my uncle and my big brother, he's the one that's taking care of them, and that's something that I should be doing. And that really changed the thought pattern of Max and perked him up to kick himself into gear. It was a nice touch to see that Decade made him his shotgun with the kind of axe at the edge of it. But all of it comes together because it plays out. They even use the Dalek, exterminate. They even use the red laser. If you guys didn't know what the red laser was, that was Short Circuit Johnny Five. When they put the laser on his shoulder, it was a bit like the Predator laser on the shoulder, yeah? So all of that was thrown in, and then it turns out that another Easter egg, guys, big Easter egg with Phil Coulson. Can this guy just please stay dead for 5 minutes? They have a scene where Phil Coulson turns into Max Headroom, and there's they didn't do it all the time, but there was one bit where we kind of glitched, and that's what Max Headroom used to do all the time. It was just, you know, some people actually even thought that he was a real AI. That's how crazy it was in the 80s. People didn't know any better, did they? So from that perspective, guys, this whole big fight goes down. They didn't, the thing about the Zephyr, guys, is they didn't say they couldn't go back in time. They just said following the time stream made it easier for them to jump forward in time. They said going back in time would obviously use up a lot of reserves and energy and everything like that. So then they actually find a way to go back in time, but it does take long. It turns out that Max and Decade was on Earth for 20 months. So, you know, when Yo-Yo comes in and there's a big hug with Max and everything else, she was without her man for like 20 months. So that's quite a lot when you consider that's over a year and a half that they had to live in 1983 and suffer the losses without the team. So they just kind of had to move on. But anyway, they saved the day, and that's what's important about it all. But the biggest clue is we get a look at the next episode where Jaiyin comes back in. And for those of you who don't remember, Jaiyin is actually Daisy's mother. And what happens is the reason why she was so long-lived is because she had the ability to absorb life force, and that's why she kept herself looking young. Now, this kind of tortured her because she created her faction who was battling against S.H.I.E.L.D. of how tortured her life was. They tried to capture her, they chopped her up into different pieces, and her husband Calvin Johnson, who's Daisy's father, he's the one that sort of saved her and tried to bring her back. But then when she came back, she just was on a revengeful tip to take down S.H.I.E.L.D. So it'd be interesting to see what happens here for two reasons. It means that Inhumans are kind of coming back. And remember, Nathan, who was stole Quake's powers, how is he going to control? We thought he had died at the end of episode 6. But how's he going to actually control everything now that he's got these powers? We know from Daisy that these powers are ripping her apart. She had the ability to break the Earth into two, to split the Earth's core. And every time she used her powers, it was literally shattering her forearms. That's why she had the gauntlets. So it wasn't until her mother had taken her into the Paradise Sanctuary that she taught her that calm emotions was the way how to control your body from literally breaking apart and for you to break the earth apart. So Nathan's not had any of these trainings, and I'm waiting to see him really split himself apart, because how can he control powers that he hasn't even grown up with or has no experience with, when we knew what it was doing to Daisy? So I want them to sort that out and see where that's going. And I'm hoping that the future does change. Remember, guys, this isn't Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. tied with the MCU, tied with the Avengers. We've gone way apart from that now. As the Ancient One explained in the Marvel Avengers, when you create another timeline, it creates a different alternative stream. So they're following a different path, in the same way Loki with the new Tesseract is following a different path as well, and not the same one that we know. So there's all these alternate realities that are being created by breaking timelines, and we have to look at the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as one of those timelines. The timeline that's been branched off, split off from the main MCU path, and it's created its own kind of existence. So that's where we are, guys. Interesting to see if Daisy can bring her mother back to the light side and help her be more positive about her mission in life, and see where she ends up in the current life frame. So that's where it is, guys. Again, solid episode, 8 out of 10 for me. I really love this season, enjoying it so much. And guys, if you're not watching it, please watch it. It is absolutely back to where season 4 was. Season 4 with Ghost Rider was amazing. Season 5 when they were in space, and season 6 Coulson, that was Sarge. Didn't really think too much of those seasons, but this season is back to its best. And I can't wait to see what they do with Quake. At the moment, we don't know whether Quake's powers are working, because she had the spinal fluid and everything taken out, which has gone to Nathaniel. We don't know whether this is madness. It's all madness all around. We don't know whether Yo-Yo's powers are back. We don't know what's happening with May. We don't know what's happening with Melinda May. We don't know what's happening with her. So the whole team is really fragmented, and we can't wait to see what happens. Only 13 episodes this season, guys, so we're halfway through, but I'm really enjoying it. So that's enough for me, guys. Hit a like and subscribe on this, and let me know what you guys' thoughts are on the episode and the season overall, and I'll speak to you guys later. Peace out. Right back at you.